get more on the mounting concern that Ireland could default on its debts. I'm joined now from Brussels by Daniel Gros, Director General of the Centre of European Policy Studies. Thank you very much for joining us today. Are we at the stage now where it doesn't really matter what Olli Rehn says, or indeed what Ireland does with his budget? Investors are just not convinced that they won't end up taking some of the brunt of the failure if Ireland cannot get enough money and pay its debts.
The budget is indeed not really the key issue for Ireland. It occupies the headlines, but the real underlying issue is how much more debt will come for the government from the banks. It has already been 20–30 billion over the last months. Is there more to come? Nobody knows. And if there's more, then Ireland clearly cannot take it anymore and will need outside help. But the real help actually Ireland is already receiving now is not so much from Olli Rehn or from the European Commission, but from the European Central Bank. And that's the key issue right now, and the key question mark also over Ireland in the future.
Now, when you talk about the central bank, once Germany came out and said that bailouts were really also going to hurt private investors if they had to happen, does that make it just much more difficult for Ireland in this market?
It's quite clear that investors are now waking up to something which they should have known a long time ago. In the EU treaty it's already written that Germany and other member countries won't guarantee for everybody. So there might be a crunch time sooner or later when a country just cannot make it. Are we there for Ireland yet? Nobody knows. But I think at this point nobody can also exclude the worst, and that's why the market gets nervous. They need more transparency, especially on what is happening to Irish banks, and that transparency we don't have.
Now, you say that we're not there yet. What needs to happen either for Ireland to avert this crisis, or indeed for them to get to the point where they just can't pay anymore? I mean, the budget has to be passed in December. They don't have to go to the market again until early next year. Is this going to run on?
This could last for a long time, but again, it's not so much the budget which is a problem for Ireland. On the budget they can save a couple of billions here or there, but on the banks they can lose 20 billion in one day. And nobody knows really how much more bad debt is in these banks. We really need clarity on what are the assets worth that these banks still have, how much more bonds are outstanding, and is the government willing to mortgage its future by guaranteeing all the bonds of the Irish banks? That's the key question, and on this we should have had already clarity months ago. It was promised several times that we had seen the end of the story, but we still are not at the bottom of this barrel, and if it's a bottomless pit, then Ireland will not be able to make it and will have to go to the European Aid Fund, and maybe at that point we will also have to start discussing about a haircut.
Now, Ireland does appear, certainly the current coalition government, bent on being good Europeans, but there are a growing number of voices in Ireland now saying that an orderly default would actually be in Ireland's longer-term best interests.
I think that's the key issue right now, especially not for Irish government debt, which is still moderate, but for the debt of the bank. The key question for Ireland right now is quite simple. Should the Irish government stand behind all the bonds of Irish banks? If it does, then the Irish government might soon become bankrupt. If it does not, then the Irish government should be able to survive, but of course then the bondholders would have to suffer.
Interesting times indeed. Thank you very much for joining us today.